This video is going to piss off a lot of international buyers because I'm going to burst your fairy tale idea of buying ready in Dubai. There are two reasons why international investors will never look at the ready property. The first is the logistics of it, and the second is the psychological aspect of it, which is subjective. But there is a very good reason why 63% of all transactions are off plan, and you'll see why. So in order to explain what the logistics are, I'm going to show you how a traditional sale occurs in Dubai, and it's a lot different compared to the UK or Europe. We have a seller in every sale, of course, and we have a buyer. Both of them are either locals or the seller can be from outside, because the seller now needs, as per the new laws, the sellers need a local bank account to receive the proceeds of the sale. It can't be a power of attorney anymore. But that's not the point. So the point is, the seller has a property and the buyer is supposed to assure the seller that the buyer is serious. So the buyer gives him a check of 10% of the amount of the property. So if the property is valued at 1 million dirhams as an example, this check will be valued for 100,000 dirhams, which is now kept with the agent, which is me in this case. So in case the buyer decides, I'm backing out, I found something else, or something happened in my house, I wasn't serious, sorry, whatever. Sure, you can back out. We'll take this 100,000, we'll give 8% to the seller, and I'll take 2% from my fees. So this basically discourages that kind of behavior and attracts only serious buyers who are looking to buy this property. And in case he backs out, he can penalize the buyer, and there's a legal due course which he can take against the buyer, which we can't do in your case. So now you both have signed the contract, which is called contract F, and you are looking to purchase the property from the seller, but the seller also has to assure the buyer that everything is all right with the property. So the seller during this 30-day period will now apply for something called as an NOC, or a no objection certificate, that he'll get from the management company that the developer is authorized. Once he has that, I'm going to just explain the cash process, because mortgage is that's a different beast. So once we have that, the buyer is now supposed to give a manager's check, which is issued via a local bank account to the government, and the government comes in on the day of the transfer. You'll go to the registrar's trustee office and hand over this manager's check to the government. The government will see your contract, see your details, hand over the property in the government online system to the buyer. At the same time, they'll hand over the manager's check to the seller. Now this check can't bounce, and this seller, that means, is assured that the money is with him, and this check is now returned to the buyer. This was just there for the security or peace of mind of the seller. If you can't already see where you lack as an international investor in this process, I'll explain it even further. Now in your case, the seller remains the same. You, however, are an international buyer. Now the first process where we lack is the check. We don't have a check from you in a local bank account in Dubai. When you make a non-resident bank account, you don't get a checkbook. So while as a seller, when you eventually become a seller, you can take the proceeds of the sale in a non-resident bank account, but that bank account doesn't give you a checkbook in order to do this process. So as an international buyer, you also, when you call me and say, Nick, I want a ready property, even if we somehow find a seller who doesn't need the assurance of the check and completely trusts you sitting in the UK or Europe, even then, if I'm able to find someone like that, how do you plan on paying this person? And that is the biggest problem, because on the transfer day, when the government is involved, we can't go to the government's office and we can't show them a screenshot of Barclays or NatFest showing that you've paid the seller. It's just not how it works. So you need a local bank account, and you need to become a local resident first. So that means you're basically going to open a Dubai-based company, which is going to cost you about £5,000. Then you're going to get the residency visa for another £2,000. You're going to spend on the flights, tickets, hotels, everything, food. You can say easily you've spent already £10,000 in order to get the residency as a business owner in Dubai, and then you get the local bank account, and then finally you can give them the check, and the I from the IB goes away. Even this whole process is dodgy, and it's shady, and it's like me asking you to go and make a fake company. And that is why most people just drop their plans at this stage. Now, the second bit is purely psychological. So in order to get to the stage where you become an eligible buyer so that estate agents can now work with you, when you come down for your research, that's another trip. So most people again will drop out right here because no one has the time to take so many days off their work to do research on one apartment in Dubai. But let's assume you do. So your second trip is going to be focused on evaluating which area you're going to be investing in. Unless you're going by the advice of a friend who bought in, let's say, Dubai Hills, you have a big task to do in the whole map, which is narrowing down and understanding which areas are accessible in your budget. Let's say, as an example, you narrow down on JVC, Arjan and Sports City. Your next stop would be to narrow down into one of these. And you are going to be talking to estate agents who are focused on those particular areas and they have deals there. Your third trip, or maybe in this trip, you'll be able to find some apartments that are for sale, and we are now relying on luck whether or not you're going to like them, because even if the numbers are good but you don't feel it, you're not going to buy that. If you do feel it but the numbers are bad, you're not going to buy that. So we're actually waiting on everything coinciding at the right time. Your trip to Dubai with the right deal on the right floor at the right price with the right tenant, or if it's empty, we're just waiting on the multiple factors to coincide. And just to drive the point harder so you actually understand from my own experience and learn from it hopefully, is that beginning of this year 2025 in Jan, I started researching into Studio City and Arjan because I wanted to buy a studio or a one bed with cash outright, just pay for it, get the rental income. That was my plan from Jan to March. By March, I actually stumbled upon a really good deal. In hindsight, it was a really good deal, but at that time I just figured that's going to be a waste of my money. But by April, I figured out that I can actually get a pre-approval and a mortgage. So I applied for the pre-approval, got the pre-approval, and then I started looking into townhouses in the Mac Hills too. Now, I used to be an estate agent here myself. So I was a specialist in this area and I know every layout the back of my head. So even before starting the research on this area and see the prices again after so many years, I knew out of the 16 layouts of 3 beds, there were 2 layouts I liked. Out of the 4 layouts of 4 beds, there were 2 that I liked. So I knew that there are about 4 layouts that I want, and as a family, we all started researching. 4 people started researching and finding deals in this area. April, I had a pre-approval which expired sometime around June, and in July, I found a house here. And we closed on it, and that was a really good distressed deal. Now that property had a tenant inside, and I had to get an evaluation done for the bank to see that the property is worth X amount of money. The valuator just couldn't visit and survey the house for the first 15 days because the tenant was on holiday. It was July. And by the time they came back, we paid for this valuation for this house. By the time the valuation came back and the bank process started, my 30-day contract with this seller expired. During the first week, the seller started changing his behavior, and I understood immediately that someone's told him he can get a higher price. And this was a distressed deal that I had found after 3 months of research. Finally, the seller did back out and he refused to renew the contract, even though explicitly in our first contract, it mentioned that if the bank needs more time, we will be renewing this contract. Not only that, the agents and the seller wanted to encash my security check that I explained in the previous bit, because I failed on completing on this contract, which means it's my fault, which means they're entitled to the penalty. We had to actually fight and send a legal notice to the seller explaining that this was the bank's fault and his tenant's fault for not allowing access into the property, which is the reason that we couldn't finish on this property. Because of that legal process, that wasted another month of my time, because if it had escalated and a judge told me that I can go ahead and buy that property because I still wanted to buy it, that means I couldn't start researching and closing on other houses in the community. So a month got wasted in legal struggles. After that, it was August, and from August till November, we did our research again. And finally, for the same amount of money that we closed a 4-bedroom for in July, we finally closed on a 3-bedroom in November, which we are now, as I speak, we are closing on right now. That means at the beginning of this year, I had a completely different plan as a buyer myself who's working here and in the industry myself. And then from April onwards until December, that is the time it took me to find and close on an actual house here, which is priced well. The 3-bed I closed on in November was actually a lot cheaper back in April. But we were just looking at distressed deals. The whole time that I wasted looking at deals, the energy, the time I had to take out of work, go for viewings, it is idiots like me who have to rely on mortgages that will pay and overpay on your properties as an investor. And the Dubai government likes to add salt to the wound because every title deed mentions what the previous buyer bought this house for, and compared to what I'm paying for it, he bought it for just peanuts. If I was lucky enough to be in your position as an investor, and if I had the cash to pay for a payment plan for a little bit more money than what I have bought a 3-bed here, I could have gotten a 4-bed here in off plan from the MAC in a better community, closer to the city, and just a far better lifestyle. But since I'm relying on a mortgage, I was pushed out into whatever is available. As a property investor, your biggest enemy is not some agent who's out to get your money. It is not some bad property where you lose all your money. It is actually your own psychology. I can't count the times that I've met people who came here in 2008, who came here in 2014 or 16 or 20, and they tell me now that they should have bought back then. I understand the whole map looks intimidating and it is overwhelming to see all of these options, but that is what we are here for. If you are interested in understanding the map and trying to devise a strategy of what to do with your capital in this beautiful country that's going a lot of places by 2040, especially with the urban master plan and with everything that's happening on the map, from the casino to the airport to Disney, get in touch with me and I'm happy to do a consultation.